Hello, everyone. Welcome to the roundup here on Blood Bowl Live. Here to go through all of the last week's action from the ADBBL Season 8. We've got 6 games to go through this week. 6 very tight games across the board, pretty much, looking at them. And joining me this week, as always, is Mr. Scott Bryant. Scott, hello. Good afternoon.
Hello and good evening.
Chris. Good evening. When does it turn from afternoon to evening? What time do we cut off?
When it goes dark. That's
so okay.
Good rule of thumb in my life.
All right.
4 o'clock then.
4 o'clock then. Okay. And joining us as well, Mr. Tom Hovell. Tom, good evening.
Good evening. You're right.
Yes, good. Thank you. Very, very good. We're going to dive in. We're going to go through the games, but first we're going to take a much overdue trip down to Scott's Corner very briefly. Scott, what have you got for us?
So, good evening, everybody. Good evening, ADBBL coaches, all other Blood Bowl coaches, and people with socially acceptable lives. So we're back. It's the bullet that you thought you dodged. So, first of all, let's get the admin out of the way. There is a special store in the east of England. No, it's not the one in Essex, just off the northbound A12. But it's an even more special store where all your dreams can come true. Yes, it's Woodbridge's finest emporium, aardvarks and dragons, where all of your gaming and other delights are to be found. This is the pillar of our community. So what do you need to do? Well, very simple. Get yourself to A&D. See Scott, give him money, see him smile. It's that simple. You don't even have to buy things. For all you listeners out there grinding through a commute after a Monday's day's work, is it worth it? It is worth it. And hey, you're worth it. Just keep an eye on that car in front. To all our regulars, listeners inside, outside the UK, wherever you may be on the mortal realm or otherwise else engaged, good evening. We're talking about you. So whether you are Lord Pat Vander East, Dazamak, even the legend that is John Reeder, and to all you other lovers out there, this is another special moment. So let's talk about this, because whether you like it or not, it's coming. Like a tinsel-covered flesh golem with block on a blitz. Yes, it's Christmas time. We hear you. We hear you ask, how can I make Christmas that little bit better? As you attempt to drown out all those dice rolls in a haze of responsible drinking and decadent hedonism. This is how. For just £5, you can turn your Christmas from a drab, dull affair into the ministry of fun wherever and whenever you go. The gift for that person who has everything, for how to spice up visiting other people's houses over the season, for Secret Santa at work, or for what your loved ones will least expect. It's the spirit of Christmas, encapsulated in a square Blood Bowl themed recycled cardboard gift of delight. Yes, it's the ADBBL beer mat, limited stock only, ready and waiting for you. A magnificent scatter template and an even just as magnificent throw-in template as well. This is what you all need. Thank you very much. Look at Tom there, supporting all the charity, supporting all the children. Chris, of course, throwing bar humbug once again into your face.
He did it because I did it. God damn it.
I wasn't paying attention, but I thought. So, as you can see, all the coaches on this wonderful, magnificent broadcast fixated by these little beauties as well. So, it's the ADBBL, it's limited stock only, it's the ultimate social status as well. And you know the spiel by now. 6 of these beauties for £5, with all profit going to Suffolk Mind. I'm sure Chris will put the Just Giving link somewhere on the page as well. So, as for this feature, if you don't want any more Scott's Corner, buy the last remaining mats, or just play more Blood Bowl. So there are too many games to report. It's that simple. And remember, a beer mat is not just for Christmas. Back to you, Chris.
Caveat, Scott will charge an extra £2 if you use loom bands.
That's true.
That's £2 per loom band. Just to confirm, I've spoken to our solicitors, Tom. Thank you.
Well done.
I don't police Scott's Corner. We just let it happen. And I might, I might start policing it if I'm going to be dug out because he's not paying attention. Yes, get your beer mats in. They're good things. Before we dive into the games, for anyone who's listening, just another reminder that we have got Hopsters, Hopsters as a approved location to play your games on Wednesday evening this week. Looking at the calendar, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games scheduled to be in. We have space for 12 games, and I'm aware of 2 people who have already spoken to me about coming in and playing friendlies, or 4 people who have spoken to me about coming in and playing friendlies. That does only leave 2 spare spaces. So you will need to let someone know, ideally myself, if you're coming in and your game is not visible on something, because we only have space for 12. We want to make sure everyone who wants to come in comes in. So if you're already scheduled on tour play, you're reserved. If you are if you are the 4 coaches that have spoken to me already, your space is reserved as well. That leaves space for 2 more games to take place on that day. So please do get in touch.
And Chris, in the spirit of good public communication, do the coaches who are playing at Hopsters this week, do they need to bring a mat or a board to play on?
Very good question. Yes, bring a pitch. There will be a couple of pitches that we'll make sure we've got, but bring a pitch with you as if you're going to a tournament or something. Bring all the stuff that you need with you. And remember, the only caveat to playing at Hopsters is that you buy a drink, and by buying a drink, you get a exclusive set of Hopsters ADBBL dice as well. So just remember that point as well. Okay. Let's dive in to some Blood Bowl games. Let's have a look, and we're starting with a incredible fixture that we had, the first one of the week, as the Jaffa Cake Snotlings, 0 team value Snotlings, got a 1-0 victory over the Bleeding Clowns. 5-4 on casualties. Absolutely remarkable result on this one. And really, I popped into the shop, and it was an incredible game. You had. I only saw the last couple of turns, and there were lots of double skulls happening for the clowns. Various rerolls were used. I saw that we had Morg on the pitch. We had Fungus was on the bench by the point where I came, but a very amazing result for the Snotlings there, and a really sort of horrid beating for the clowns. Scott, we'll come to you first then. It's really difficult to tell with this Snotling team any kind of results that come up. I don't know whether to be surprised or not, because I think that the way that they're built and the kind of inducements that they can have, I feel like they could beat anyone. So it's really difficult to call any game when you kind of look at it.
I totally agree for that, Chris. I think that sort of uncertainty and that craziness just plays perfectly, one, into the ethos of Snotlings, but also very much into the ethos of this particular coach. Good evening, Scott Norman in chat this evening as well. Yeah, when I saw on tour play the star players that Coach Acredes, the other Scott, had rolled, because for those who are not aware, it's the opposition coach who, by the wonderful mechanics of a bingo machine, they're the ones who draw the star players that you're going to be facing, and he picked 2 brutal ones. You know, to draw Fungus and then to draw Morg, and then there's a giant Merc on top of it as well. It was going to be a very long day at the office, and I thought if any coach can maybe put a dent in this, you know, triumvirate of brutality, I thought it was going to be Coach Acredes. But as you rightly called out at the top of the game, 9 casualties, 5 for the clowns, and 5, you know, significant players gone as well. Even, you know, the Bloodseeker, you know, who'd been skilled up, -1 edge, then clots. So it was quite an incredulous spectacle. Yeah, and I think it's one of those, as a coach not playing the Jaffa case, it's very much fun to see what the other coaches roll as the star players. But when you see that, you think, I'm just glad it's not me.
Yeah, it is a tough result. I think you look at the when you kind of see that strength, that sort of the strength 7 giant, the strength 7 fungus, the strength 6 morg, Tom, that's an incredible combination of players there. And how do you kind of like any team, no matter how bashy you are, is a team like a corn team where there's the bash, but maybe not the edge that you need? Are they going to suffer a bit more against one of these lineups where you can't run away maybe as easily from these kind of strong players?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's the crazy thing is this Snotling team's now played 4 games, and out of those 4 games, only one Snotling has died. These are resilient little things. They've had a number of niggling injuries and missed a couple of games, but they're all coming back, and it must be the most frustrating thing. I obviously am with Scott that I'm not, fortunately, not playing this Snotling team, but to bring up to your point, yeah, it must be quite difficult because with all that frenzy, you do end up being in base contact with a lot of these players. And this giant seems to have gone on a rampage this time. It's just crazy how much injuries and kind of disruption it's caused on it.
Looking in the chat, Scott has said, Morg, the Giant and Fungus, Mighty Blow +2, +2, +1. Got lucky with my mutation roll from the inducement coach, turned a Snotling into Hackflem, and he scored for me. I mean, I mean, we've talked about this before. It's a very difficult team to plan against, and you kind of have to go in and I think you need the dice on your side. It sounds like the Corn team didn't have that too much. With a few key kind of turnovers happening at points, but a great result for the Snotling team. Scott is playing this team. He's got his kind of particular method that he's using with this team. He's doing it well. It must. There is an element of while you can't plan to play against him, he also probably can't plan too much going into each game because he doesn't know what he's going to have at his disposal. So it works a bit both ways there, but a very strong result there for the Snotlings. A result that I think the Corn will have wanted more out of that game, but we will see them appear later in the roundup with a good result in a later game later in the week. We will jump on to the next game, which is the Buffalo Biggins versus the Orphic Gladiators. A 1-0 win for the Gladiators in this one. A tight game on casualties, but a few injuries coming the way of the Chaos Renegade team. And I have to say, this is a tough one. Two coaches that I really like to play against. Two coaches that I really like in our league, in Harrison and Luke. I think again a very tough game to call. I think you look at kind of experience and you lean towards Harrison, and then you look at the impact Luke's had. It's only his second season in the ADBBL, and he was one of our best rookies last season. So a very good result, I think, for Luke here. Tom, I don't know. Again, like all the games this week, any result could go either way. Do you think it's the big guys in that Chaos Renegade team that are giving kind of Luke the edge? Sort of, has he kind of maybe got a bit of a handle on them?
Yeah, maybe, but looking at this started off with the weather being very sunny. You could argue that it was pushing to Harrison's favour, being with those, as you say, the big guys, and they've got a goblin, so he could be using like throw teammate to disrupt the Orc team. And it started off quite good straight away with turn 1. Rat Ogre doing what a Rat Ogre does and actually taking out one of the big and blockers, actually, which is quite a surprise for an Orc team. And then straight away, I think that Goblin, I assume, it must have failed a dodge and proceeded to implode itself. And then it's kind of settled down for the mid game. So I'm making some assumptions here that it was just a big push and pull in the center of the pitch until the end. Was it?
It wasn't far off that, Thomas. Quite an apt way of describing it. I actually watched this, and it is on the mighty YouTube if people want to go to watch it. What made the result even more impressive from Luke's perspective as well is Luke actually received in the first half, and Harrison did phenomenally well to keep it to a 0 score at half time. So you're going into that, and you think, we've seen this with Harrison. He's a very skilled coach with the big guns, and the way it was going, despite the Roger taking that first injury, they were starting to get a few injuries. You know, couple the Goblin went, the Lineman went. So it just felt that the Orphic Gladiators were up against it, and it felt like the momentum was going much towards Harrison and the Orcs. Then in the second half, the ball got kicked relatively deep, about 2/3 the way down the pitch towards as Harrison's driving his left-hand side. And kudos to Luke. He really pressurized that part of the field as well. So it did turn into a bit of a scrum, as you said there, Tom. But the big guys as well and the Gladiators managed to hold their own against the Buffalo Biggins. And even it was going, I think it was turn 15 when I believe the Troll had to go for a blitz to try and basically block one of Harrison's guys onto the ball, because the ball was at this point next to the sideline. The Troll failed. Even with the loner reroll, the Troll still failed then on that one. So it just looked then, few turns to go, and that was it. But then, you know, shout out, these things do happen in Blood Bowl when you think it's a foregone conclusion. The dice goes your way, the rolls are there, they're not your way sometimes if you're trying to get the ball and close it out. And then it just takes one skaven, whether it's a lineman, a gutter runner, a blitzer, whatever it is, those bloody rats, love them to pieces, just got in, got that ball, and got the 1-0 win. So I think it was a good match. It was back and forth. Could have gone either way. Could have gone either way for the result or the draw. And yeah, very, very good match. And you know, kudos for Luke for sticking in there, getting through it, and getting the 1-0 win.
What happened to the thrower? Just out of interest, because it seems to the weather turned from sunny to nice, and then the human thrower promptly died.
Yeah, that was it, because Orpheus, I believe, was one of the guys. I think from memory, Luke decided not to play his APOC on him as well.
Yeah,
which was a bit of a brave decision.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting move. I mean, the renegade human thrower is not as good as a regular human thrower. You've probably got him kind of full of skills, but if you rely more on the dark elf lineman, maybe sort of not too vital to the team. Luke's in the chat says nearly got a pass to a rat ogre at the end of the first half, attempting to score. Hoot Growl will try to live on by the end of the season. Hoot Growl indeed, Luke. Hoot Growl was a big melee in the middle for most of the game. Very tough drive on both sides. And he was thinking of firing the thrower anyway, so maybe that's why it wasn't wasted, the APOC there. The Goblin was crowd surfed, and then the thrower failed a dodge as well. A very good result for Luke there. Harrison not quite getting the start to the season that he wanted, but plenty of games left to play for him.
I think as well, sorry, Chris, just to finish that, I don't think you can write off Harrison by any stretch of the imagination. He's got lots of games to go yet, and we actually saw last year in the last season he did have a bit of a slower start compared to a lot of coaches, but then even when he's in the conference, he was significant influence in terms of how that tournament turned out as well. So long way to go. Yeah, I'm sure we won't hear the last of Harrison and the big guns.
Agreed. Let's go on to the next game then. The Washington Deathskins versus the Lavender Lynxes. Necromantic Horror versus Amazons here. A 1-1 draw. Again, another very tight game. Lots of very tight games happening. Identical when it comes to casualties. Identical when it comes to SPP. Two evenly matched coaches playing an evenly matched game by the looks of it here. I mean, Tom, I'll have to come to you first as our resident Amazon and necromantic horror coach here. So I'll let you kind of tell us whether these are two kind of rosters that match up to each other quite well. Obviously, a lot of tackle on one side, a bit of a mix of skills on the other. Would you kind of assume this game would go one way or another?
Well, I'm particularly worried because I've still got to play both these coaches. And from what one can see on this, they both play an exceptional game and know their teams. Yeah, it does look like it was, again, it was pretty evenly matched. I've got the Lavender Lynxes this Wednesday, and I'm not liking the fact that they've now got wrestle on a couple of players and a frenzy and a strip ball and block in there as well. So it's a bit crazy on that side of things. It does look like it's a really good Amazon team, but equally, as you've quite rightly said, that necromantic horror team, it's the classic lineup. So you've now got all the positionals, both lots of all the positionals on that team. Got sure hands on a ghoul runner, which is perfect. Oh, we got tackle on a wraith as well. So that's again an equally decent team. It starts off pretty quick, actually, by the looks of things. Turn 2 touchdown, which is pretty impressive in the actual match itself. And then it kind of again dies down a little bit until the end of the first half, where there's a casualty, followed by an injury, in fact, a death on turn 9. And I don't believe it was a resurrection either. So that was with the zombie lineman out. And then it was a 1-1 draw, which perhaps potentially made it a bit easier for the Amazons at the end of that second half to actually score that draw.
Scott, I'm looking at kind of the two teams here. Both coaches are being very sensible with their skills, randomizing on linemen, choosing on the positionals, and saving up. We've got two teams in their first season here. Are we looking at two coaches who are maybe sort of building this season and looking forward for a longer campaign?
Possibly, yes. If you look at both coaches and both of the teams, relatively few skills, but to your point, Chris, they are building those skills in the right way. See what you get on the lineman and focus on your core positionals. Interestingly, Jack's first season, and he's still only got one werewolf. I look at this and think, would a second werewolf have made a difference, especially against those Amazons? Graham's comments for that, he got 7 turns of unsuccessful dice at the start of it. I did see the early turn 1 score, and I thought that felt very early for Necro as well. But we know both Necro and both the Amazons as well can score relatively quickly, within 2 or 3 turns. So yeah, I was wondering where it was the match and the score going to push on from there as well. The first casualty, the line woman for the Amazon took herself out, and I think after that, it was a lot of pressure from the Amazons. There could have been the equalizer could have been prevented by Jack for the Deadskins. Unfortunately, they didn't quite get there as well. And I think Graham, from reading that, I think given all the bad dice rolls he had as well at the start of this, just one of those days at the office, Graham, I think he's done, but he's done well to get a 1-1 draw here against Jack, who is a very potent and potential coach.
Looking at the rosters, it looks like he's got 2 werewolves now. Whether he only had one before the game, I'm not sure, but he's definitely got 2 on that roster now. So a good full roster on his side. I think it's going to be very. It could be. It's looking quite tight. There's a lot of coaches who are just sort of slowly building the games up in this league. And it's difficult to tell whether draws like this are going to be seen sort of come the end of the season. Are they going to be sort of missed opportunities or key points that these coaches have picked up? We'll have a look at the table a little bit later and see. But a good fought game by both coaches. So well done and good luck for the remainder of the season. We're sticking with the Lynxes and we're going to their game against the Numpties. A 1-0 win for Elliot's Numpties side. 5 casualties coming from the Nurgle team in this game. Much SPP. A kind of SPP and casualty score that we're maybe more used to seeing on Elliot's side. And having a look, it looks like almost exactly as we kind of said at the beginning of the season when Elliot had an unfortunate result with that Nurgle early on. And we said that, sometimes he gets off to a slow start and then kind of continues to build. And Tom is exactly what we said. He's had the slow start. He's got those out of the way, but he's building and now he's getting the results.
Absolutely. I think a bashy team does suit Elliot. As you can see in this game, he's played it well, and again, I think the Nurgle team are a fascinating team. I think I've got a box somewhere that I might have to open up.
I'm sure you've got a box somewhere, Tom.
So to have a look at, because it does interest me on this game. He's clearly been playing well with this team, even though he went down. Well, in fact, they both went down quite early on in the first half with injuries. So they was quite even by the looks, and he's going backwards and forwards. And then the fouls come in the second half quite early on, fouling considerably to try and get some of these line women out of the way. So he slowly wore them down. So, and then the Pestigore came in and scored the final touchdown right on the last turn. So I think maybe I didn't really see the game or wasn't paying much attention to it when it was happening. I'm afraid, sorry, but it might be that the Amazons fell into Elliot's Nurgle plan of just slowing the game down and turning it into a grinding game, and basically locking those Amazons into position rather than being able to dodge out.
I'm just having a little look now at some of the honors list because looking at the game. So Elliot's team is now one of the most valued team, and
Yeah.
when you look at it and you take into account that he is the only team in the top 5 most valued that is not a redraft, it's an incredible feat. But what I'm looking for here is around the injuries because I feel like he is taking a beating and he is losing players and he is struggling with the regen in the games. He's not had much regen, compared to maybe some other coaches that we've seen. But he is up there, he's 4th most versatile coach up there. He's got the 4th most casualties that he's inflicted. He's up there with the 4th most fouls as well. So he's really kind of making an impact on all of those boards. Scott, it's a very impressive kind of standing and a bit of a statement from to be so high up on all of these boards with a team that has not redrafted.
I think it's a phenomenal effort, especially if you look at the progression of the team. He's already got 4 block players and he's got 1 player with claws as well, which is a terrifying thought, isn't it, really? I think it also puts into perspective as well. If you look at the timeline of this game against the Lynxes, it really all happened in the last third of the game in terms of that level of resilience that you find with Nurgle, and not as much in terms of the edge with the Amazons as well. So the fact that when, Graham was losing players, he lost the early line woman and, line person. He was losing the players, even when he had Estelle Lavenue on, she went off as well. But it felt, looking at this, that it could have gone, it was one of those challenging matches for Graham. So to keep Elliot at bay, but then Elliot knows how to play, how to score. And again, it's that classic Elliot turn 16 touchdown to claim the win as well. So I think another really solid, resilient match in terms of grinding the opposition down by Elliot. And I think a very good, resilient match to keep it to that 1-0 win for Graham as well. And it doesn't surprise me, Chris, at all, in terms of where Elliot's position is at the moment. He might be losing the players, as you just mentioned, but he's really making the most and maximizing the return on his key positionals and on those skilled up players as well.
That game leaves the Lavender Lynxes positional wise looking okay, but a few linemen out, a lineman with pro out for the next game. It'll be interesting to see kind of whether Graham can bounce back from two sort of quite tough results, a last minute win and a last minute draw and a last minute loss for Graham. But Elliot absolutely pushing himself up the table, and we'll have a look at that in a little bit. We return to the Bleeding Clowns for our penultimate game this week. A 1-0 victory over the T-Belly Trudgers, Corn versus Halflings. You had a halfling team here that were unbeaten going into this game. You had a Corn team that had taken an absolute pounding off the back of the Snotlings. But that maybe in sort of some weird level of hindsight, maybe helped in this instance. The T-Belly Trudgers only were able to take a halfling master chef. They would have had a lot more inducements had all of those players not gone and it not been full of journeymen. So possibly a bad result that has led to a hard-fought win here, and inducements playing less of a factor in this one. Looking at the casualty count as well, 4 casualties, but 3 for the T-Belly Trudgers. Still those trees having an impact. Scott, probably a important bounce back for the Clowns after a difficult first game this week.
I think it was a fantastic bounce back by the Clowns, especially in context of when they finished against the Jaffa case. They'd lost, was it 4 players they'd lost? They were looking, very, very, well, don't want to say fragile for Corn, but for where Corn teams can be. And then to go up against the Trudgers, 2 very built up trees as well with block. High level of starting casualties and fouls coming through. So again, to see off that level of pressure, particularly with all the fouls and the pushing as well, it really is. Kudos to Coach Acreedy Scott in terms of how this one went as well, to manage it in terms of despite he had badly injured players, I should say, but he still went toe to toe with the Trudgers. He still was able to hold that, position, the shape of his team as well. And it was a very, very good result as well. A lot of frenzy for the Trudgers to face. Justin couldn't get the Halflings to stick their landings, and then they kept the Clowns held back until turn 8, showing that pressure that Corn teams can put there as well. So it was one of those, it went down to the last, catcher dodging away, went to a tree, could have got a last minute throw to get that result as well. The Marauder rushed, got the ball, knocked it over, and then it was done. So very, very tough match as well for both coaches, but I think especially for Corn, that bounce back they've had from the beginning of the week, and very much a reversal of fortune.
It keeps them, definitely keeps them in the runt, in the run. In the
runt.
I was caught between rut and run. It keeps them in the running, in the NBC, definitely keeping them up there, fighting for the top 4 positions. Looking at the Halflings and the kind of season that they've had so far, I mean, they've had a good run so far this season. We've got a couple of wins and a draw, and then this is their first loss. While they've got these 2 tree men, both with block, multiple block on one, grab and brawler on the other, so some very, very handy tree men there. Possibly not, not the end of the world, this result for them. They've had a strong start and will still be very much in the hunt when it comes to Stunty Cup.
Oh, absolutely. And it looks like they're also going for the Dirtiest Player Cup as well in this game, really racking up the fouls on this side of things. Yeah. And, we know Justin. We know how he plays these really well. Noticing he's doing the kind of the meta game of getting those completions on those treemen to make sure that they've got SPP for all those lovely new skills.
A really strong halfling team that he's built there. Some key skills on some halflings as well, and he won't be too worried about having to take any journeyman if he even needs to. I don't think he even needs to with the numbers in his team. Clowns looking in a much better place after this game. Still a blood seeker miss next game, so still slightly down on the strength, and then there are still a number of stat busted players there. But there's a lot of good mutations on some of those linemen, and there's some key skills on some of those players. So I think two teams here in very strong positions to continue with the group stage. Going to our last game of the week then, and a result that on paper certainly wasn't quite as close as all of the other ones that we've had. A 3-1 victory for the Chaos Chosen, for the Hillbilly Howlers versus Boulders Bowlers, the Corn team here. Simon has had quite a slow start to the season with this Chaos Chosen team. I think Chaos Chosen are an interesting team because you start with very particular skills, but no skills that necessarily help you with regards to kind of free rerolls or anything like that. So it could be a difficult team to get started with, but he's got a good result here with the 3-1 victory. The Corn team and Owen with the Corn still kind of building up a bit of confidence and knowledge with this roster here. Scott, when we look at kind of experience on this one, Simon's the more experienced coach here out of the two, and has got a good result out of this game.
I think he's got a very good result out of this game. I actually was in store very briefly, saw that just after Owen had taken that 1-0 win, a good turn 5 touchdown. My concern at that point was, had he scored a bit too early? And knowing, you mentioned the confidence, the knowledge, the expertise, which does come with practice. And Owen is getting better every single match. He is learning. He is a quick learner. He's quick to adapt as well. Simon, a lot of knowledge in terms of Blood Bowl, a lot of experience on a lot of different teams as well. So even when he scored that the turn 8 touchdown as well to get back into it, obviously having kicked in the first half, it did feel a bit of inevitability about it. What I think for me with Simon playing this team is two things for me which have really sort of turned it from the first few games. First few games, he only had the one reroll. We mentioned this, I think, last time. He's now got that second reroll, which is a big help. He's got that. And as a result of coming out with this, forcing especially that third touchdown in the last 2 turns as well, putting the pressure on, making Owen, force the play, getting the 3-1 result. If you look at the Hillbilly Howlers as well, Simon is now in a position with SPP, he can start choosing skills across 1, 2, 3, I think it's 4, including the Minotaur, -4 Minotaur. It's 4 skills now he can apply. All of a sudden, that is sort of that tipping point whereby a team goes from core basic skills, if you're lucky, as you mentioned there, Chris, suddenly you can tailor your team and your positionals to specific roles that you need. So I think for me, it feels like Simon has maybe hit a bit of a tipping point with this team in a positive way. And again, I still think there's a long way to go for both coaches. I think Owen is still learning. And I think, like we've all been when Blood Bowl, sometimes your first season is the difficult season as well. But he's got a good support stable around him with the Huns, shall we say. So, yeah, I'm thinking for Owen, we'll hear a lot more things. And I think if Simon progresses with his Chaos Chosen, I think they're going in a really good direction at the moment.
So would you skill these players up now, or would you risk it for another game to see how they play?
It's tricky.
If it was me personally on the lineman, what would you do, Chris? Because you like randomizing when you got SPP.
I mean, of all of the teams out there, I think Beastmen linemen, I think they are possibly the best linemen in the game, out of the box linemen. because while they're relatively average across the board, they've got access to a good array of skills in general and mutations and strength skills. And they've got horns, so they're all blitzing on a 4. And I think actually they are positionals that you can easily turn into incredibly powerful and key players. We've seen it with the likes of Nani in the Riotous Rams. So I think it's probably, I think saving up is a good plan on this. And I think with his, with the skills that he's got here, I don't know whether it's a case of that game has given him that one extra SPP for each of these players that he needs. Now he's in a very strong position. I believe his next scheduled game is on Wednesday against the Numpties. And my feeling is that the Numpties are a very high value team. If he doesn't spend any of this SPP yet, he has got a good selection of star players and inducements to pick from. However, I think he can still take some pretty good and pretty key stars if he does choose a couple of skills here, and then maybe he can protect some of these players at the same time, because we know that Elliot's not going to hold back. So,
I was just about.
yeah.
What's the inducement level at this moment for the Chaos Chosen against Nurgle? So you're talking, so it's 300k. So even if Simon was to take 5 skills randomized on his lineman, if he wants to save for the Minotaur, if he wants to save on the blockers, so be it. So I'll still give him 200k. You can get a half decent, star player for 200k to do some damage, especially against Nurgle.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? If you look at the star players he could take, if he chose some skills rather than randomize them, and you look at some of the star players he could take a chainsaw, he could take Skitter to give him some pace, he could take Creek to blast a gap. He's got some really good options. If he wants a bit more strength, he would still have enough to take Glart or to take Skylar. There's some really, really strong options there. If he maybe only picked 3 skills, he could take Hackflem, and then that's going to be a very, very good.
He's also got the ability to take Skitter as well.
So he's got some really good options there.
Yeah.
Before we end, then just a word on the Corn team, on the Boulders. Got lots of random skills coming in here. Random block on a Corn Gore is a very, very good shout. Monstrous Mouth can be very good. Some randoms on some linemen. It's been a tough start, but we often find that when people come to the league and they haven't played very much, then it can be a bit of trial by fire in your first season. The key thing, Scott, like you said, is to be learning quick.
Yeah, I think Owen does learn quick. He's got a good base, I think, with this team to build on. He's got 3 rerolls. He's got 12 players already. He's got 100k in the bank in terms of inducements. Okay, he's playing Mr. Tom Huns, the current champion, shall we say, who's playing very, very well with his Chorf. So it's going to be a challenge. Although when I spoke to Owen on Saturday, he had a friendly with Tom last week, and they, I think, got mid of their second half, and he was within 1 touchdown. So it's 1-0 to Tom at the time. So I think he's played Tom a lot. He knows his style. I think he's got nothing to lose. And I think if he goes out there and has a bit of a YOLO, you never know. This is Blood Bowl. We've seen what happens this season when the dice aren't your friend. So I think he's done very well. I think there's a lot more to come from him. So yeah, looking forward to future games to see what he can do.
And also, just to bear in mind, some of these teams now have played their full set, I think. Looking at the latest scores on the groups, well, we've still got another 2 games. It's 8 games. Sorry, it's 8 games we play, isn't it? Not 6.
But there will be teams, and we'll go to the tables now, because we are now at the point in the season where we've got some teams who have played lots of their games and will start to be looking over their shoulder a little bit at some of the coaches who maybe haven't got their games in yet. Looking at the ABC, Cherry Bomb's sitting very nicely, 4 wins from 4 at the top of there. Look at that smile on his face. Look at that little. We're going to do a whip round on Wednesday to try and get some bounties on some of those wall dances. Numpties, that win jumps the Numpties up the table to be in the contention there. Having played 6 games, so maybe we'll be looking over their shoulder a little bit, but 11 points is a very strong position to be in. The Wolverhampton Shamblers and the Chaos Storm didn't play this week, but both round out the top 4 in this group. Looking at the bottom end of the table, even just 1 point for the Washington Deadskins and 3 points for the Hillbilly Howlers moves them slightly up. Boulders still sitting at the bottom with no points at the moment, and no games played by the rest of the bottom 4, who will all be looking to improve. Looking at the NBC, Transfagarian Terrors still sit at the top of the table there. Luke with the Orphic Gladiators moves up into 2nd, and Bleeding Clowns move up to 3rd with their mixed results this week, but a very strong showing from all 3 teams, who again I think will start to look over their shoulder a little bit at some of the teams who have only played 3 or 4 games there. Looking down at the bottom end of this table, no games played by the bottom 4 on this side, so not much movement elsewhere. Looking a little bit stationary, this group, not much movement around, but lots of games left to play, and the Righteous Rams still yet to play, so could still throw a spanner in the works there, looking at the teams. That is all our games for this week. Just the 6 games this week. We will have many games to bring you next week. Having a look, as we said, we have got 8 games being played on Wednesday in Hopsters. Some really interesting looking fixtures coming out of this one. Hillbilly Howlers versus the Numpties, Bowlers versus Chaos Storm. 2 very interesting games to look out for there. World's Edge Berserkers versus the Rust Bay Riptides, another one that I think could be a really interesting result. And the Agartha Mules versus the Atomic Cherry Bombs could be a feisty game as well. So lots of really interesting games there, and more games coming later in the week. We've got Norse versus Gnomes, we've got Snotlings versus Orcs, and we've got Khorne versus Wood Elves coming on Saturday as well. So lots of games to bring you next week. But that is all for us this week. Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much, Tom, for going through this week's fixtures. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the roundup this week. We will see you on the next one. See you then.